Hello, Chair. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Jen.
So today's session will be practice with lead questions, themes related to assessment and feedback. And our presenters will be Frederick Othiambo, who is the LPAC chair and a teacher of English of very, very many years. And we have Linda Rouse, who is the British Council consultant and a teacher of English with a wide variety of experience. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. I hope we get to learn and also share best practices as we continue. I'd like at this moment to welcome Fred. Welcome, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jen. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. We are presenting with Linda Roas. As Jen has introduced Linda, I think Linda will say more by the time she will be presenting, but we'd like to thank her because she's been our mentor in this project. We started all the way in May, and we have gone through about 9 webinars and 3 in-person meetings. And today being our 10th theme, our last major webinar, we welcome all of you and all of you who have been participating in the project. So the British Council English Connect program, we have questions about assessment, and that's what we are going to ask the lead questions from the 10 bi-monthly themes that we've been going through. So it's a bit of reflection. Next slide, please. Yes, what are the objectives of today's webinar? The first objective is to discuss the, the first one is to discuss questions related to assessment and feedback. As I've said earlier, we have bi-monthly themes, there were 10, and each theme, at least there were some lead questions, and that's what we are going to find out. To share relevant teaching English resources, we have been going through British Council online resources, and that is what we are going also to share, the relevant resources that we can get online from the British Council resources that can help us. And lastly, because the last webinar, it will be a summary, will summarize the LPAC British Council project 2024-2025, started on 27th May 2024 and will end on 1st March 2025. Right? So let us get on with the business of today. And we want to look at what have you learned so far on LPAC British Council 2024-2025 project. How has your knowledge of assessment developed through this project? How have you changed how you assess your learners? So please be free to use the chat on the questions that we have on the screen. From the beginning of our project up to now, what have you learned so far on the LPAC British Council? We have had webinars, we have had in-person meetings, and even a workshop in Mombasa. So you are free to share. Please write in the chat something that you've learned. Jane will help us read what they are posting on the chat. Yes, feel free to post something on the chat. Feel free to unmute also. If you want to say something, you can just unmute and maybe a sentence also. Feel free to use the chat. I can.
We have a question from Leonard.
Yes.
He has learned the use of British resources materials. Yeah.
Thank you, Leonard. Probably at one point we'll ask you to be specific. Which kind of resources did you use, Leonard?
Linda says they are not just British materials, they are for everyone. Thank you. Then you have Dan who says, I have learned and actually put into practice the use of AI, especially ChatGPT, to assess learners. Thank you. Oh, there's a clarification there from Linda. Says, or are you referring to British Council materials? I think that's what he's referring. Yes. Leonard, right? Okwiri? Then we have Antonin who says, I have learned the use of assessment for learning. Thank you, Okwiri. Thank you for the clarification. I think he meant British Council. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Let's have a few more.
I think also, Chair, what stood out for me was that assessment for learning, not just for testing, but using assessment for enhancing learning. Yes.
Yeah, Khadija wants to say something. Khadija, go ahead. I can see her hand is raised.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share my experience. I have gotten so many beautiful resources from the British Council, from the Teach English Africa website, like the reading race activity, which is used when teaching skimming skill. I used to skip it, but after coming across such a resource, I now enjoy teaching skimming as a study skill.
Yeah, thank you very much, Khadija, for that. Any other person? Anyone else?
Yes, we have Dixon who says, I have learned to handle strengths and weaknesses of different categories of learners or students. Yeah, then Linda has a question. How has assessment changed for you all in the classroom? Yes, that's a good question.
Yes, thank you. Can we address Linda's question? Our last point there, how have you changed how you assess your learners? How has it, any change that you've seen?
Yes.
Do you think your learners have noticed any differences? Linda is asking. Yes, Macau, can you put something on the chat? That's my way of greeting you. And welcome, Isaac.
We have Faith who says, LPAC has made me a fun-filled teacher, for I am able to incorporate fun and make learning interesting using the various methodologies. Yes, that's from Faith. Thank you, Faith.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we can move to the next slide as they keep on sharing on the chat as we move to the next slide, Linda. Yes, so thank you, Dixon, for that. So the question that we have, the first question, is the feedback I give to my learners after assessment useful for their learning? What do you think? What sort of feedback do you give learners after assessment, and how long does it take? Can you also put your thoughts on the chat? Or you can unmute and say something. If the feedback you give to your learners, has it been useful for their learning? What is your thought? What do you think? What sort of feedback do you give learners after assessments? And how long does it take you?
We have a response, I think, also on that question in the previous one from Dixon that says,
Yes.
on how I assess my learners, I've learned to get open questions generated by them, but in line with the content taught at any given time. From time to time, I fine tune and make assessment lighter. Then Linda says, one problem is that it takes so many hours to give good feedback. You're right, yeah. Then Paul says, very useful as it helps them to know their strengths and weaknesses in line with what was taught. Yeah.
Yes, feel free to unmute. Welcome, Elizabeth. Yes. What sort of feedback do you give learners after assessments? How long does it take when you assess writing, reading, all the skills? 40 minutes, 1 hour, less than that? Feel free to share. Have you checked the chat? Is there something posted on the chat, Jen?
Nothing yet.
Yes. So what sort of feedback do you give learners after assessment? So that's what we wanted to know. How do you give feedback? Leonard, the feedback given after assessment is useful.
We have some.
Yes,
Sorry?
go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So Isaac says, I find the approach shared by Jane very effective, recording, then sharing. Then Okwiri says that feedback given after assessment is useful. It enhances learning. Then Isaac says, I give it promptly. And Dan says, at times, we give immediate feedback verbally in class. Yeah. But we have some more comments. Dixon says, yes, that feedback I give is useful since from time to time, it makes them develop positivity towards the subject of discussion. Then Faith adds, I have had to readjust my assessment modes, prompt, friendly, and quite considerate, regardless of the scores. Then Rukia says, it's faster with alternative assessment through peer feedback and self-reflection and others. I think there's a hand up as others are sharing their comments in the chat. We can have Khadija share something.
Thank you, Jen.
Go ahead, Khadija.
Okay, so thank you so much. For me, I believe feedback to learners is very important, especially immediately after assessment when their minds are still fresh. I normally give written feedback and verbally, depending on when the assessment is done. But now, how long does it take you to give back the assessment? It also depends with the kind of assessment. If it is essay, with the numbers that we have in class, it can even take a few days. Sometimes we even take a whole week to mark their compositions. There was a time we had a session about assessments with British Council, and then someone shared about taking pictures or scanning and using AI to help with the marking and giving corrections. I tried to do that, but it also takes a lot of time. So what I normally do, I tell them to work in groups. So they do a writing in groups, and then it becomes easier to mark the group work than the individual work. So for the group work, it might take a few days, like 1 or 2, but for the individual work, it might even go up to a week. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Khadija. I can see also some on the chat. Jen, Paul says something there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are so many good comments coming in, and thank you for everyone who is sharing. So we have Alice who says, I give it immediately after assessment for maximum impact. Then we have Linda who says, great comments, everyone. This shows so much learning and change. Yes. Then we have Irene, written feedback due to population. Then Antonine adds, continuous assessing learners and training them on key areas to look for as they assess peers, as they work in immediate, as they work is immediate and helpful. Then Elizabeth adds, immediate assessment is preferable. Then Paul adds, the time of feedback depends on the nature of assessment, e.g., summative or formative. Formative assessment, I give feedback immediately, either verbally or in writing. Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the feedback. Can we move to the next slide, Linda? Keep on sharing. Yes, thank you very much. From what you have said, we can look at the choices that we have on the screen. Feedback choices, which ones do you give from A to H? So you are free to pick one and maybe just share on the chat, or you can unmute and share. No feedback at all, a simple grade, the correct answer version, a comment, just a comment like well done, fair, good, not good enough, work harder, an individualized comment, error correction code, all errors. So which one do you give? So Linda, Jen, can you read in the chat what people have given in the chat?
Yes, we have Khadija who says E, Okwiri says E, Linda usually do F, so learners have to do most of the hard work by correcting errors themselves. Then we have Paul who says D, Dixon says C. So yeah, variety. Oh, and Isaac adds Isaac Mwangi E, Isaac Obat E, Nuru says C, D, and E. Then Josephine adds full assessment of strength and weakness and possible areas of improvement. Then Linda adds H takes such a long time. And then Elizabeth adds D and B for S's. And Alice E.
Alice Oko
Yes, Alice
takes
Oko.
E, an individualized comment. Cynthia is there.
D and E for Cynthia. And no one else does F, Linda is asking. Yeah.
I think F is okay. Let us hear from them. Faith
Yeah.
says E and F.
That's F, yeah.
So at least we have somebody who's taking F. Yes. I think from those who mark paper 3, I think they can take F, because that's where we have imaginative writing and essays. And I think these are the error codes. So they could be different depending on countries. Like you know what they stand for. The error codes. T can stand for tense. PREP can stand for prepositions, misuse of prepositions. SP can stand for spelling errors. P can stand for V can stand for verbs. Yes, so Elizabeth concurs with me. So I think we normally note this. Sometimes I think, let me not answer that. Because there are different rubrics. Sometimes you put them on the margin, sometimes you underline immediately using your red pen and show it there. So it depends. So maybe you can put in the chat how you can apply any of them before we proceed. Just 2 seconds for that. How do you apply? And share in the chat, or you can unmute and share. Yeah,
I
please
can
feel free.
begin.
Yes, go ahead.
So I can read what is on the chat.
Yes.
So where is it? So Khadija used to use F for a long time ago. And then we have Nuru who uses F also in assessing composition. Then coding says for small class size, an individualized comment would be more effective. Then we have Elizabeth, you are right, Chair, for question 2 and 3. Then Linda adds, I think B and D are okay, but don't help learners very much, not very constructive. Then Mary adds H. H is what she uses.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think you had quite a number of responses from participants, and I think now we can welcome Linda to take us to the next slides. Linda, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frederick. That's great. It's so good to see that everybody is doing all these different things, that everybody's enjoying the resources, and that's lovely. And everyone's participating a lot. So it's lovely to be here with you today. I wish I could be in Kenya because it's so cold in London at the moment. Okay, so let's just look at these. I think it's such a difficult thing, isn't it, doing feedback on assessments, because we are busy. We don't have all the time in the world. We want to be good professionals, and we know that, for example, H would be what would be best for all of them. It would help them all most, but we just simply don't have the time, do we? We need a life. We need our family time, our health time. We need to eat. There's just not enough time in the day to do it as well as we would like to, I think. So I think if we're thinking of the system, if it's the college, the school that needs just a grade, then I wouldn't give any feedback at all. I'd just give general overall feedback to the whole class. Because all of these individualized comments and full assessments, E and H, they take hours. If you've got 30 in a class, it's hours and hours. All your other classes, yeah? Does it actually help the learners as much as all the hours it's taking for you to do? We've got to balance that out, haven't we? Because we have to think of our mental health, our time. That's why usually I choose F. If I have to give a test back to the students, I'll try to get them to correct it. I'll put that error correction code, F, then I'll put them in groups and see if they can work together to work out what the correct answer is. This makes them work for their money. It makes them do all the hard work rather than me. I think maybe because I've been teaching such a long time, I've realized that I cannot devote all my time to my teaching. And sometimes it's even more effective to hand over all this feedback to the learners instead. Sometimes I put the answers on the board after they've worked in pairs, just to make them do all the hard work to learn what they should have put. It's difficult though, isn't it? Getting that balance. So the next slide here is about constructive feedback. and constructive feedback for teenagers. I don't know if you've seen this article from the Teaching English website. It's a very, very nice article by a teacher in Casablanca in the north of Africa. Is Casablanca Morocco or Algeria? I'm not sure. I think it's Morocco, is it? Okay, and this is effective ways of giving feedback. And she actually did some action research into different ways that teenagers respond well to. So it's things like, yeah, doing things that they want, that they respond well to, things that they feel useful, maybe things related to social media that they can respond to well, group work, pair work. I think we can have a little look at some of these articles, if it's okay with you. I'll click on the link. Then I'll need to stop sharing and then share again so that you can see it. Let's have a look. Okay, and we'll just scroll through this briefly so that we can have a look and see what we're talking about. Can you see my article from the Teaching English website now? Yes, okay, good.
Yes, we can
So,
see.
okay, great. So if you have a look, we'll just scroll down through this briefly. And here she's got, this is her different experience, feedback on speaking and writing activities. And this is different feedback on writing tasks, and then feedback on speaking tasks. And she played with all of them to see which ones worked best. So her first one, method 1, the correction code. Yeah, so this is, she agrees with me, this raising the students' awareness and showing it's their responsibility. Only when they are unable to find the answer, the teacher provides it. I know many teachers like to help. Many people go into the teaching profession because they love helping. And some teachers help too much, don't they? Some teachers do too much that the learners could actually do. Okay, so method 1 was the code. Method 2 was correction by the teacher. And then method 3, which she says is the lazy way, just a comment saying, well done or not enough. And many students, she says here, felt frustrated when she did that. So can you relate to this sort of feedback here? It's interesting because she tried out all the different ways and looked at the responses. Speaking tasks then, she gave every student a document praising their strengths and highlighting the areas of improvement for method 1. Method 2 was a general comment with no details. She got all the teenagers then, if you look at this bit of the survey, to fill in a questionnaire to see what they liked best. And as it says here, the choice was clear. The more personalised, the better. And look at that top one. For the writing, the number of students who preferred the feedback with method 1, the correction code, is 22 out of 33. Interesting to see that the teenagers are actually active in this and they want to learn from their mistakes. Only 2 of them preferred just a short comment, and 9 preferred the correction by the teacher. I call that one the lazy method because that's lazy students. They just want the teacher to tell them. Okay, so all those different conclusions there. To sum up, teenagers need clear, constructive feedback. It has to be specific rather than general. Constructive feedback gives praise, advice, encouragement, shows them what they need to do. Okay, so do you agree with that article? Can you put in the chat what you think? Oh, great. So Khadija's going to do the survey with form 3. Great. This is a really good way, very, very simple action research to compare assessment methods. Does anybody agree with that article, or anybody else think it might be a good thing to try out? Please feel free to put in the chat. And of course, you'll get the link from that when we share the slides as well. So back to, I'm sorry, I got to stop sharing again, and it's, right, let me go back to the PowerPoint slide. Here we go. So that's that link. And of course, you can all go to that and have a look in more detail. Right. We also have other types of feedback. And if you'd like, I'd like to look at this article too with you. Are you okay with that, for spending this time looking at some of the articles? I think it's great because we see what we're talking about. So this one is a whole page of short activities that you can use in class to support assessment for learning. So if we click on this again and go to it, and again, I'm going to have to stop sharing and then go into that article so that we can share with you. Okay, so can you see the article now? Assessment for learning activities. Yeah, okay, thank you, Jane, for nodding when I ask a question. Right, okay, so here, this is loads of really good activities. Let's have a look through and see if you've done any of these. So if we come across one that you've done, put it in the chat. So have you ever done this drawing a face? Smiley face, neutral, okay, sad face. If you've done that, put it in the chat. Just put face. Let's see how many people have done that. It's great, especially it's really quick, isn't it? Especially for lower level learners. A summary sentence. Ask them to write one sentence summarizing what they learnt, what they know, at the start of the lesson and or at the end of the lesson. It's great if you do it both, then they can compare. Anyone done that summary? Pair share. This is most of think, pair, share. So just pair share, talk to your partner about 3 new things you've learnt, what they found easy, difficult, something like that. It's great to summarize, isn't it? Anyone done that one? I've got loads of comments in the chat, which is great. Loads of people have done these. Lovely. Sometimes it's great to have a look at these types of activities to remind ourselves of things that maybe we did in the past, things we'd like to share again. Then we've got the traffic lights. Anyone done traffic lights? So you can have some cards, you can make them, green, yellow, red. You can have them in the classroom maybe, or you can get them to stand at various parts of the room, the red part, the yellow part, the green part, if you don't have any card. And they're just showing like total physical response. Red, they don't understand. Yellow, more or less. And green, they totally understand. Whether they really understand what you want them to understand, though, that's another question, isn't it? Because they may think they understand, especially if they're confident, but not totally. And then we need to delve a bit deeper. I don't know if you know Post-its. Post-its are those little yellow sticky papers that they can stick up with a sticky bit at the top. We use those a lot. You can give the little sticky papers, Post-its, to groups, pairs, and they write up what they learnt, what they found difficult. And that's a lovely, like a sharing board you can have at the end of the lesson to see. Yes, Antonine uses Post-its. Excellent. Khadija, the traffic lights using popsicle sticks. Excellent. Did you stick the colours on the top to have little popsicle things they can hand out? Excellent idea. Thank you for that. There's this one here, draw a square. Get them to draw a square on their page and colour it if they have coloured pens. Frederick's done Post-its as well. Elizabeth is going to try Post-its. Great. Then we've got the not clear one. Ask them to write 1 or 2 points that are not clear. So this forces them to think of what is not as clear as it could be. thumbs up if they understand, thumbs halfway, more or less, and thumbs down if they don't understand. KWL is quite nice. They make a grid, K, W, L. K is what they know. W is what they want to know. L is what they learnt. And it's good if they do this as a group and individually sometimes. We've got so many ideas here, haven't we? The most thing, the most useful, the most interesting, the most... This is getting very specific feedback on comparing things. A, B, C, D, so you're asking for answers, they hold up the cards. Mini whiteboards, when you can get those small whiteboards, maybe laminated paper, and get them to write their answers here and hold them up. That's great for a large class when you can't ask everyone individually. And then just simple observing. Okay, and then we have more here as well. The strategic use of questioning. And we know questioning is so important, isn't it, in the assessment of learning. Open questions. So it says here, closed questions only ask learners to recall. Open questions encourage thinking skills, communication, eliciting more information. And there's lots of examples of these, what they call good question stems. Like what if, why, how would you, can you explain? Great use of questions there. This is an interesting one. The use of might. Encourage them to think. Not why do teachers ask questions, but why might teachers ask questions? So it's a very open type of question, isn't it? It's not a fact with one answer. It's an open, suggesting lots of possible answers. I think you probably know about wait time. Yeah, the more, it's been proved, the more wait time a teacher builds into a lesson, the better the quality of the answers they're going to get. This is like waiting for people to write in the chat in a webinar. If you insist on people writing immediately, they're not going to be thinking very much. If you give lots of encouragement and time, like Frederick did in the first half of this webinar, people are going to be thinking and we'll get a lot better quality answers. Higher order thinking skills, bringing in their critical thinking, prompting, bouncing, which is building off other people's answers. And then we come at the end to the ways of giving feedback with a comment only. Yeah, a good idea sometimes. They usually want a mark, but encourage them to focus on the comments only. It's very difficult to vary your comments enough. And I know when I've got a pile of papers to mark, I just end up putting great or really good. And you have a limited number of types of comments, I think, in your brain when you're really, really tired, when you've been working and marking a lot. This feedback sandwich is good here. So you've got a sandwich, bread, cheese, bread. Positive comment first, constructive feedback in the middle, positive comment at the end. This sandwich is quite nice. And the constructive feedback is embedded in the two positives. If any of these are not clear and you want more explanation of them, then please ask. I see here that Paul has said he likes the KWL one. He's learnt that one today, which is great. And the thumbs up, somebody else has done. Great. Time in class for corrections is really important, isn't it? And this idea of don't erase corrections. So if you teach learners to rub out everything that's wrong, you'll never see what their first thought was, and you'll never see how they improved. And this is good for them as well, to see how they're improving. Usually I get my learners to put a big red circle or highlighter pen around anything they've done wrong to remind themselves when they're looking back at it later. Okay, so peer and self-assessment, which you've mentioned already as well. Different ideas, sharing learning objectives, feedback sandwich, a learning wall. That's quite a nice idea. Posting positive feedback. Peer check, we've talked about before. And then at the bottom here, just a couple before we stop sharing this. The 3 things. I like this one. At the end of the lesson, ask your learners to make a list of 2 things they learnt and 1 thing they still need to learn. That's quite nice because it doesn't mean nobody is sitting there complacent. Haha, I've learned everything. No, this is life, isn't it? I've learned 2 things. I need to learn 1 more. Learning journals, portfolios, reflection time is lovely. Setting goals, personal goals. The whole topic of assessment is such a huge topic, isn't it? And you've been covering this throughout your project. Self-assessment forms as well, personal goals, and you'll be pleased to hear that's the end. Okay, so I'll stop sharing that one. Are there any questions about any of those? No, okay. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint because I've got another few questions to look at. Let's have a look. Okay, so that was all about the feedback. We're coming on to question 2 now, so we're going to go more quickly through the others. Look at this question here. Am I providing the necessary conditions for all of the learners during assessment and feedback sessions? So, can you now think of all the learners in your class and think about whether they all benefit in the same way? Who benefits the least? Think of a couple of your students who have not benefited from this wonderful assessment, assessment of learning, assessment for learning you've been doing. Why? And how can you improve this and make it more equal? So can anyone think, do you think all your learners benefit in the same way from assessment and feedback? Let's have some comments in the chat. I know mine don't. I know some of my students respond really well to certain techniques and some of them don't. Some of them surprise me by responding well when I don't expect them to. Some of them respond badly when I expect them to respond well. I suppose everyone has a bad day sometimes. Okay, while you're thinking about that, I want to give an example. So here is my example here of neurodivergent students. Can anyone define neurodivergent? It's quite a new word. If anyone would like to unmute and define it or write in the chat. I wonder if you have any neurodivergent students.
We have a comment from Elizabeth.
Great. Yeah, and you're right, Elizabeth. They don't have the same abilities, do they? They all react differently. So what do we do when we have so many different individuals in our classes? Mixed mental abilities, mixed every ability, aren't they? And some students are more different than some of the others. How do we even do this job? We're amazing, aren't we, as teachers? How can we manage to teach all these different types of students together? Okay, so neurodivergent is when learners have different types of needs. It's one word that brings together. Okay, yes, good, neuro. Yeah, brains function differently than neurotypical students. Yeah, and we're all along that line somewhere, aren't we? We're not all of us the same and the neurodivergent are different. We're all along that line somewhere different. We could classify students into different types, like students with autism, We used to talk about students with Asperger's, but we lump them together now with autistic students, students with dyslexia, all these different types of differences or learning difficulties, as Faith says here. Yeah. So one way of talking about all those students who are slightly different, but in so many different ways, is talking about neurodivergent students. Do you have any examples of how you have supported any neurodivergent students in your class? Do you assess learners in your schools for neurodivergency? Do you give extra help, for example, to learners who have different learning difficulties? Do they get more time in exams? Yes, Faith, you do. Can you tell us? Would you like to unmute, Faith, to tell us what you do or what your students, how they're different?
All right. So in my class, I have different types of students. I have one who is dyslexic. So how we try to support them is to have them in pull-out sessions. That is what we call the one-on-one session, where we try to at least boost their self-esteem by giving them the basic concepts, such that as a teacher, when you're teaching the complex concepts, they'll be able to get it. So we pull them out in some lessons, and then we give them the basic concepts even before we start our classes, maybe English classes. And then once we are handling the complex concepts, they already have an idea. So it's just one way of boosting their self-esteem.
Great. How do you have the time though, Faith, if you're a full-time teacher and you're teaching all the rest of the time? And if you had 6, 7, 8 different neurodivergent students in your class, how would you ever manage to do that?
Oh, great. In our school, we have inclusion department. So we have teachers who've been employed specifically to deal with students who have these difficulties. So they have their own timetable and specific time when they are supposed to handle these students.
Okay, that's great. I think you're really lucky and that's wonderful. Is this the government state school?
No, it is international school.
Okay, right. Okay, so I was going to say, well done, Kenyan government, for providing that, but I won't. I'll say, well done, international school. Okay, so ideally, of course, every government would help, wouldn't they? But I know the money is very tight. And even in the UK, wouldn't you expect the UK to have really good inclusion systems, extra help for learners, neurodivergent learners? No, it's being cut all the time. And it's down to the teachers to do it in their own time. So yeah, learners, neurodivergent learners, they need to be assessed. They need to know, not so that we label them. We're not going to say that learner's different, that learner can't do that. We have to have this label to give them extra opportunities and to make their, for example, assessment fairer. So there's lots of things you can do, like give them more time. And that's something that maybe someone who has ADHD or autism, they will perform as well as everybody else if given more time. And some neurodivergent learners find it very difficult to understand instructions. So they maybe need the instruction written as well as spoken and reminded of the instructions a few times. I had a son of my friend has always found instructions very difficult. But if somebody takes a little bit of extra time to remind them to explain about the instructions, then he gets it. It could be they need more breaks, that they cannot focus and concentrate for more than an hour, maybe, so that you need to give them a break. They come back and then they can perform well enough. It might be that you need to involve the caregivers, involve their parents or somebody with something at home to train them. So all of these things are things that we could do, but also all of these things can help the other students as well. Maybe clear instructions can help everybody. Great comment by Nuru here, giving extra time in the national exam, for example. Language buddies, pairing them up to a student with dyslexia. Great. Okay, that's really good, but not recognised by exam body. Give them time, yeah, and keep pushing. When so many teachers push on something, things change more quickly. Teaching's limited, Elizabeth, on this, but at a personal level, we can offer remedial teaching at the teacher's desk. Yeah, lovely. But if one teacher who's already hardworking and tired has to offer remedial teaching to another 10 students, how are you going to manage to do that? You need to protect yourself, even though you care about the learners. Okay, our time is rapidly running out. This is very interesting. So many questions here, and I hope you'll be able to discuss some of these questions later, as well as looking at some of these resources. How can you get colleagues and learners feedback to improve your lesson planning and assessment? Do you get feedback from colleagues and from learners? What's the best, most useful way? Any comments in the chat? I've got a little video here that you can look at later, no time now. This is a year-long project this teacher did on developing teacher agency. So agency is your ability that you feel that you have the power to change things. This is a very powerful thing. And she developed this by self-directed peer observations. This was a project over a year. Really interesting. Something maybe some of your teachers might like to work on. And then I think this is the final question for the webinar. How has working with and learning from others during the project helped in my continual professional development? So to round off this project, and I can see you've been working so well together. How many other people have you worked with and learned from? Any answers in the chat? Name one thing you've learnt from others during this project. Anything at all? Can you remember? How have you developed as a teacher? Any ideas? While you're thinking, I'll just show you, we won't look at this, but there's this little link here by Anne Burgess, and it's about how people have learnt from each other internationally. And don't just think about people in Kenya. Brilliant to learn from people in Kenya. Think about Sub-Saharan Africa. Think about the regional webinars. And we have an excellent webinar coming up, not this Saturday, but Saturday week, by Rukia and Elizabeth from LPAC, talking about your project, your LPAC British Council project, on the whole Sub-Saharan African stage. So I really hope all of you will support them there and come and talk about assessment and the British Council project. And this is a really good way of sharing what you've learned and what has worked in Kenya with other teachers. All of those courses on the the Teaching English site, you learn from people internationally, don't you? The Telegram English Connects group, Africa ELTA, all of these things. We learn so much. Different ways of working together. Communities of practice, small ones, face-to-face, WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups. Your English Language Teacher Association, especially yours in Kenya, which seems really strong, which is great, learning from each other all the time, face-to-face and online. Projects help people work together, don't they? And you're working together for an aim, for a purpose, and your project is being wound up now, which is great, and we'll see the final products, the final reports, and it's so good to have that to work towards. Hopefully we'll have another project next year, different project to work towards something different. Online training is brilliant. Now we can talk to people on the other side of the world just by clicking a Zoom button. Aren't we lucky? WhatsApp, Telegram groups, of course, and the Teaching English. Let's have a final couple of comments. We need to end. How have any of those helped you? So I'm going to stop sharing now. And who would like to put a few comments in or raise their hand just very briefly for a few final comments? Anybody? Elizabeth's feeling lucky. Great. We're lucky we got you for the regional webinar on Saturday week. Networking is
Yeah, thank
great,
you.
Frederick. Okay, Elizabeth, yes,
Yeah,
great to see you.
thank you. And I think on the larger side of things, you cannot always depend on what you know, what is around you. It is safer to go out there, hear what someone else is doing, and then bring that into your environment and see if that works for you. If it doesn't, it's fine. Then you pick another one. So it's always life is continuous, and you learn and you unlearn and you learn again. And I think that is what is offered here. That is good.
What a lovely comment. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That is so true, isn't it? And with these communities of international, national, sub-Saharan Africa, we can learn just by comparing, listening, and it really helps us move on, doesn't it? Excellent. And Jacqueline there's learned about proposal writing and conference presentation. Her professional network's grown. That's excellent. Okay, so please carry on celebrating your own success. But don't just think it's like that 3 things you've learnt. I've learnt this, but now I want to learn this. 2 things you've learnt and 1 thing you want to learn. Always be moving on to learn something else. Then you'll never go wrong. Thank you so much, everybody. Anything else, Frederick, Rukia, or I think we need to end here.
Thank you very much, Linda, for having taken us through this webinar. And thank you very much for having been with us throughout this project. As we started in May and now we are winding up in March. Perhaps before maybe I wrap up, I would like to give the chance to my fellow team members. I don't know whether Tiberi has managed to join. Jane is here. Constance should be around. And even the chapter leaders, Khadija is there. I can see Daniel Omolo. Perhaps they could maybe give us some feedback, the chapter leaders, just briefly. You can unmute.
Hello. Hello, good evening.
Yeah. Yes, Arthur, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for this chance. Now, I want to say that I was looking forward to this the moment this came on board. I really notified my members because personally, one thing that I have learned so much, leaving all the other things, was, was proposal writing. I think the moment I attended one of the seminars on proposal writing like this, that's why I would never miss. I never need to refer to anywhere when I do my proposal writing towards things like Africa ELTA or any other. This session has been very, very informative. I've been listening so keenly, and I want to thank Linda for that good presentation. We really look forward to more and more of this. As Kisumu chapter, we say thank you, and we look forward to more and more of this. Thank you from Kisumu.
Great. I've just put the link to the webinar with Rukia and Elizabeth in the chat. So please sign up there. You need to register in advance. True, Mary. You can't commit your entire time to your career. You can't. You'll burn out. Yeah. Please do something for yourself. Please look after yourselves and your own well-being.
Wow. There's so many good comments. Thank you everyone for the good comments. Thank you, Linda, also. We've learned quite a lot and a lot to reflect on. We are going to be sharing with everyone the slides and also the links to the different resources. Thank you for that. Thank you for your participation. There is a lot. I can see Elizabeth says, I want to learn to know more on alternative assessment. We have Momo who says, I learned that as a teacher, you can't, yeah, I think you mentioned that you can't commit your entire time to your career. Then Anthony, indicative and deductive teaching, use of AI was helpful. Then Jacqueline, I'd like to learn more about differentiated assessment. And then Lina says, a reminder of mental health has opened my eyes about me. Wow. Thank you everyone for those good comments. Let's continue engaging even in our community of practice WhatsApp group. And Facebook, anywhere, please, let's continue having this conversation. Thank you, Dan from CII. It was great. The link to the many resources has made our teaching better and fun for learners and teachers. So at this point in time, unless there's any other question, we would beg to end. I don't know if anyone would like to anything. Yeah, I think we are good to go unless Rukia has something.